Good morning. You all ready? Yes, sir. All right. Thank all of you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here today to kick off a great and momentous milestone for the U.S. Department of Transportation, for the Federal Aviation Administration, and for aviation. And I want to thank you, Administrator Huerta, and Brian Wynn, the CEO of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, for joining me today for this event. Since I was sworn in as Secretary of Transportation, one of my goals has been to make sure this department is leading the way in creating an environment where innovation and technology have an opportunity to flourish. That's why our department has pushed forward safety-enhancing advances in technology, such as positive train control, next-gen, and soon, new guidance on autonomous vehicles and vehicle-to-vehicle communications. That's also why we created a first-of-its-kind Smart City Challenge to keep our nation on the leading edge of transportation technology. I have a strong partner in this work in President Obama, who has directed that we install an ethic of innovation across our entire administration. One such sector where we are seeing such great potential for making our lives better is the rapid evolution of unmanned aircraft and the use of unmanned aircraft systems, or drones, as they are colloquially known. However, as this new technology continues to grow and evolve and develop, our agency is also charged with striking the right balance between innovation and safety. Even as we harness the great potential of drones, we must develop the tools that protect both manned aircraft and folks on the ground from harm. The Part 107 rule, or the small UAS rule, as we call it, that takes effect today accomplishes this objective. This milestone is significant for several reasons. It ensures that a burden on our industry and on our department is relieved. To this point, the only way to operate a drone for commercial purposes has been to receive a Section 333 exception from my office and from the FAA. And I've personally reviewed every exemption request. This rule now sets forth the rules of engagement and enables commercial users to commence operation as long as they follow the rules. The economic impact of the rule is clear. Industry estimates that over the next 10 years, commercial unmanned aircraft systems could generate more than $82 billion for the U.S. economy, and by 2025 could be supporting as many as 100,000 new jobs. In other ways, too, these aircraft truly have the potential to transform the way we fly, and they also offer many potential benefits to society. Because of their size, drones, like the ones you see today, I think we have some examples somewhere outside, are well suited for a wide variety of activities, from oil rig inspections to search and rescue missions. There are literally dozens of missions that a drone can do that otherwise would have put human life at risk. There are also other potential uses: inspection of utility towers, antennas and bridges, and as well power lines and pipelines in hilly or mountainous terrain. Farmers can use them to monitor crops, or they could be used to support wildlife conservation and capture panoramic scenes for films and television. Academic institutions can use them for educational purposes or to pursue research and development of new possibilities. And again, in many cases, these drones can perform these activities with much less risk than a manned aircraft that might have to fly in dangerous terrain or bad weather. It's taken a great deal of work by many dedicated folks to create this flexible framework for introducing unmanned aircraft into our airspace. And I do want to take a moment to thank those who have contributed both within our agency and outside of it by way of comments for the incredible hard work and dedication to getting to this point. I also look forward to seeing the developments and the innovations that tomorrow holds because of the safe exploration and transformations that will occur from this rule and from this technology. Just as we're seeing innovative technologies transform our roads and our ports and even our seaways, drones are also blazing an uncharted path that will continue to revolutionize our airspace. Importantly, this is not an isolated set of rules that are taking effect today. This is part of a larger administration push to strike the right balance between safety and innovation as we undergo one of the most dramatic periods of change in the history of transportation. So with that, thank you, and I'd like to introduce and call up our Federal Aviation Administrator, Michael Huerta.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for taking the time to be here today, and to those of you that are listening in on the phone. As you heard from Secretary Fox this morning, today is a very important milestone in the evolution of our efforts to safely integrate unmanned aircraft into our national airspace system. A few hours ago, many of us were still asleep, and our small unmanned aircraft rule actually took effect. In a nutshell, what the rule provides is for routine commercial drone operations within certain limitations. But we believe that it will enable innovation to flourish while maintaining the highest levels of safety in the world's busiest and most complex aviation system. The rule is also known as Part 107, and it makes it easier for people to fly commercially by largely eliminating the need for operators to get case-by-case approvals. It allows unmanned aircraft weighing less than 55 pounds to fly in sparsely populated areas up to 400 feet high and up to 100 miles per hour during daylight hours. And it greatly simplifies the pilot qualification process and the requirements. Importantly, it also includes a provision that allows people to request waivers if they want to operate outside the parameters of what's included within the rule. Now, we know that when we're flexible in our approach to integration, we open up much greater opportunities for more kinds of small unmanned aircraft operations. Just a handful of years ago, it would have been hard to imagine that we would be gathered here today for this announcement. Back then, only a few thousand drones were being sold each year, and most of those were being sold to enthusiasts of remote-controlled model aircraft. Now, the FAA forecasts there could be as many as 600,000 unmanned aircraft used commercially during the first year after this rule is in place. Secretary Fox touched on the tremendous economic impact that drones are having. There's another compelling narrative associated with this. Drones are helping to create a whole new means of realizing the American dream. Today, many of the country's bright minds are captivated by the virtually limitless possibilities that the drone industry offers. Drones are opening up aviation to people who never would have thought of entering the field through the traditional route, and college students are pursuing careers as engineers, computer scientists, pilots, and even lawyers with the intent of applying their skills in this new and emerging industry. The growing numbers of unmanned aircraft in the skies today and the lightning speed of innovation underscored the need for us to continually evolve as we achieve the perfect balance between accommodating innovation and at the same time ensuring safety. As I said a moment ago, today marks a milestone in this effort, but we wouldn't be here if we had tried to do it alone. Our progress is the result of partnership and of collaboration, and the commitment of all stakeholders to make safety our top priority. Here at the FAA, we know that we don't have all the answers. We gain strength and we fashion a better product when the outcome is the result of a rich variety of different perspectives. The rule that is taking effect today is a case in point. The draft proposal that we published for public comment in February 2015 required everyone to fly within the limitations of the rule, and it did not provide for exceptions. Well, during the comment period, a number of people told us they believed this was too rigid and would unnecessarily stifle innovation and opportunity. So they suggested that we include a process a process by which people could get authorization to operate outside the basic boundaries of the rule, provided that we could determine that these operations could be conducted safely. We listened, we considered that suggestion, and Secretary Fox encouraged us to find ways to enable this. So we created a waiver process that is part of this rule, which is taking effect today. In the past couple of years, we've made progress that nobody believed was possible when we first started tackling drone integration, and we know that our work in many ways has just begun. While we were analyzing the small unmanned aircraft rule, we also began working on a number of additional integration challenges. One of these is a rule on unmanned aircraft flights over people, and we hope to have that proposal out by the end of this calendar year. We're also working on a proposal to allow people to fly drones beyond their visual line of sight. Now, to aid us in our efforts, we're establishing a drone advisory committee. This committee will help us prioritize our integration activities, including the development of future regulations and future policies. And it will include representatives from across the aviation spectrum. We're also chartering an unmanned aircraft safety team that will include a variety of stakeholders from the drone and from the traditional aviation industries. Its task will be to analyze safety data to identify emerging threats that drones may pose to aircraft, people, and property, and to develop strategies to address those threats and to prevent accidents. But our concerns go beyond safety and security. We're also mindful of privacy concerns, and we have been actively engaged with our interagency partners to address this issue. We have provided support to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's multi-stakeholder process to develop and to communicate best practices for privacy, and to ensure that there is accountability and transparency for both commercial and hobbyist unmanned aircraft use. Now, as part of the privacy education campaign, the FAA will provide all drone users with the NTIA's recommended privacy guidelines during the unmanned aircraft registration process and through our Before You Fly app. We will also educate all commercial unmanned aircraft pilots on privacy during their pilot certification process, and we will issue new guidance to local and state governments on drone privacy issues as well. I like to say that integration is never going to be a finite process where one day we'll all sit back and say, okay, we're done. Along these lines, the small unmanned aircraft rule that is taking effect today is not an end in itself, but rather it's an important step forward. There will be a lot of key steps forward in the coming months and years, and we're never going to stop working to make integration both safe and efficient. Collaboration among government, industry, and the public will always be critical to this effort, and it will certainly be a critical factor in effectively implementing the small unmanned aircraft rule. So again, I thank you for your time. Now I'd like to hand it off to Brian Wynn, President and CEO of the Association of Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, who is really one of our key integration partners. Brian?
Thank you, Administrator Huerta, Secretary Fox. It's a great honor for me to be here today to mark this really watershed moment in aviation history. My name is Brian Wynn. I'm President and CEO of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. It is the world's largest not-for-profit organization devoted to advancing the unmanned systems and robotics community. Our members develop air, ground, and maritime systems that drive the cutting edge of technology today. The United States has been a pioneer in aviation since the Wright brothers first took to the skies more than 100 years ago. And throughout that period, there have been many, many milestones. Today, we've reached another significant milestone. With the small UAS rule now in effect, the commercial UAS industry is cleared for takeoff. The small UAS rule establishes a new regulatory framework and helps to reduce many barriers to commercial and civil operations. In reducing those barriers, the rule allows businesses and innovators to harness the tremendous potential of UAS and unlock the many economic and societal benefits the technology offers. Our economic report referenced earlier has basically forecast more than 100,000 new well-paying jobs and the generation of more than $82 billion in economic impact to the economy. And that's in the first decade that UAS integration comes into the airspace. Additionally, the flood of commercial exemption requests that were referenced earlier that the FAA received before the rule took effect provides strong evidence that the commercial UAS industry is poised for incredible growth. AUVSI analyzed the more than 5,500 exemptions approved by the FAA before the small UAS rule went into effect. The results highlight both the wide number of industries adopting the technology, as well as showcase the exciting potential of the industry now that the small UAS rule is in effect. For example, the approved exemptions cover 42 different types of business operations and have been granted to operators in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. Whether it's aiding search and rescue missions, advancing scientific research, responding to natural disasters, or helping farmers tend to their crops, UAS are capable of saving time, saving money, and most importantly, saving lives. As was recently highlighted at a drone workshop sponsored by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the AUVSI Foundation, government and industry collaboration is critical for keeping up with the pace of our industry's innovations. In that same spirit, we look forward to continued industry-government collaboration that advances UAS research and paves the way for a true holistic plan for full UAS integration, including beyond visual line of sight operations, flights over people, access to higher altitudes, and platforms larger than 55 pounds. Thank you very much.
We'll take some questions. Sure.
This is Bill Carey, Aviation International News for Administrator Huerta. Do you have any sense of how many remote pilot certificate applicants will also seek waivers, at least in the first year?
We don't really. We'll have to see what happens in terms of how the whole thing evolves. But if you're looking at the two things separately, we had over 3,000 request signups for people to obtain the remote pilot certificate starting today. And today, when we issued, with the rule taking effect, we issued about 76 waivers of the rule from the 333 and other applications, our Pathfinder program that we're currently pending throughout the system. So this is all, as the Secretary talked about, a flexible framework where if people can demonstrate that operations can be conducted safely, we do want to consider it.
And just to clarify, the holder of a remote pilot certificate will no longer need a certificate of authorization from the FAA.
Again, as long as they're operating within the framework and provisions of the rule, yes, they no longer need any kind of a certificate of authorization and or any kind of an exemption, as long as they hold the appropriate certificate. That's correct.
Let me also just point out that what we're describing here in the UAS rule is a challenge to the agency across a number of platforms. As you have rapidly advancing technologies, we are looking at how we set the dial on our approach to safety, because we want to make sure we are not just a leader in innovation, but a leader in safety. But that requires, in this time of rapid transformation, remember, UASs weren't in the conversation even 10 years ago the way they are today. We're going to have to be more nimble and more flexible. That doesn't mean we're going to be unsafe. It just means that our approach has to change, and what Michael described is right along the lines of that. In the back.
The number of FAA enforcements on people not following the rules is really a fraction of the number of registered drones and even like the number of complaints that have come from other pilots. What are the consequences for following the rules, and do you have the manpower to make sure that happens?
Well, let me start with a couple of points. Now, we have to think about the universe of drones this rule covers the commercial use. And I think largely we have seen with our exemption process very good compliance with the rules that have been established and the restrictions involved in those exemptions. There is a broader universe of drones that are available to recreational users, hobbyists, if you will, and that is an area where I think we're going to continue working alongside our interagency partners, working with industry, frankly, to ensure that people know the rules of the road, so to speak, when they use their personal drones. There are parts of our country that are restricted airspace. There are parts of our country where the uses have certain restrictions on them, but you wouldn't know that if you didn't know to go look for it. Now, one of the things that's happened in the last year that I think is very important is that we've executed a registry that folks now need to register their drones, and part of the reason for that is precisely your point, which is that it gives us a way to loop back if a drone is found to be in a place it shouldn't be or whatever. We have a way of identifying that drone and tracing it back to the user. A byproduct of that registry has been consumers are now going and finding out what the rules are, and hopefully we'll have a better level of compliance going forward. But I'll turn it over to Michael for anything I missed.
You covered